So Chelsea have agreed a deal with Brighton to sign forward Joao Pedro for around 50 million. David Ornstein for The Athletic breaking that story on Sunday night. I felt it appropriate on short notice to get a Brighton perspective on the player that Chelsea are about to sign. Yet another player from Brighton, never ending the pipeline from the Amex to Stamford Bridge, and of course there are jokes to be had about that, but also a perspective on the player, his strengths, his weaknesses, what he could provide to Enzo Maresca's squad heading into 25-26. Very glad to welcome back onto the show Ryan Adsett, who is very well known in the Brighton community, YouTuber, podcaster, owns the site Talk Seagulls, so definitely go and check out his work and content. But let's get to the convo with Ryan, and I really do hope you enjoy. So Ryan, you just before we start recording here, you already admitted you're kind of getting a bit sick of having to come onto Chelsea podcast to speak about Brighton players. I mean, this really does probably feel for a Brighton fan, and to be fair, for a Chelsea fan as well, like Groundhog Day. Like I'm reliving this constantly.
Yeah, I mean, how many times since 2022 have I been on your show? You could probably search your podcast with Ryan on it, and I've been on it so many times over the last few years, including so many short videos. Oh, it's insane, mate. It really is insane. But here we are again, and I'd say thank you for the money and thank you for all this, but I want to see us win some trophies, my friend. I want to see us competing with Crystal Palace. I want to see us not losing out on all of our top players and saying transition season again, but I guess the writing was on the wall for Joao Pedro.
Yeah, it definitely was. I mean, just from a point of view that he didn't, if I remember rightly, it kind of fell out quite toxically with Hertzler. Is that a pretty accurate depiction of what happened?
Yeah, it's not far off. I think it kicked off with Jan-Paul van Hecke with Joao Pedro during a bit of a problem in training. I don't even know, to be honest. They looked all toxic sort of on the pitch. He should have been sent off earlier in the season for an attempted elbow, which I'm sure he could find pretty easily.
Yeah.
Very aggressive one as well, not just a little bit, really went for him. And then he did the same thing later on in the season, and obviously it was against Brentford, and he did get that sending off. Sort of lashed out. I think a lot of unhappiness probably from his side. I think he felt like he was played out of position. I think he felt like he was ready for bigger things too soon, perhaps, but it's a shame with how it's ended, because I still look back on Joao Pedro and I've got so many things around me in here of all the iconic moments that Joao's given us over the years. So it is hard to accept this one, to be honest.
Looking at his overall stats for Brighton, that will now be the way he's looked at back at the Amex, 30 goals in 70 appearances, which is quite a good return goal wise. In terms of the comparison to when Cucurella left to when Caicedo left, I'm not going to mention the other one because he was barely playing for you when we bought him. In comparison to those two, how big of an exit to the current team does this feel in comparison?
Yeah, I think it's just as bad. I think probably the easiest one of the three was Cucurella. I was upset because he's a good player of the season, I know, but I think we signed a Stepinian and we were quite quietly confident that we had filled that gap at left back. I think Caicedo, I was absolutely upset for sure. I thought and still think he's one of the best midfielders in his position in the world. I think he's a fantastic player. The way he receives the ball so deep is insane, and I thought we'd miss that a lot if we tried to play through sort of midfield. Joao Pedro, though, I think you're missing a player that is a bit more. He's the bad guy, right? He can score goals when you don't necessarily deserve it. He can change games. He can make things happen when your back's against the walls. He's a big game player. He's someone that's going to step up to big moments 100%. You don't think he's going to miss a penalty, that's for sure. So those sort of iconic moments you miss from Joao, but then it does mix in with a lot of inconsistency. He doesn't always have good games. He does cover a lot of distance. That's worth mentioning, but it hurts. But knowing that we've then got Jorginho that's now broken in, he's had a season here. It feels like we're probably better positioned to replace him than perhaps we could have been, say, this time last year, for example.
In terms of his attributes, what when you're describing him there in some of those big moments, is there a certain attribute or certain things about his game that, from a positive point of view, these are the things that stand out most in my mind when I think back to Joao Pedro at Brighton?
Before I'm technical, I would say it's that he's there. He's always there. It's always him. Whenever it's a big game, where it's a big moment, it's always him. And that's not a coincidence. You look at Marseille, you look at Man City, you look at Manchester United. So many memories come to mind. He was our first ever goal scorer in the Europa League ever. There's so many moments for Joao that's we went out to Marseille, came back, he's the goal scorers. We went out to Athens for the first time, he's the goal scorer. It's always him. And again, that's not a coincidence. That's not just something that I think you're gifted with. And I think that's what separates very good players from elite players, is being able to be consistently that guy, someone to pull you out of the mud. So from a pure footballing perspective, I think that's what Joao Pedro is for me. That's before I look at anything technically wise, before I look at data. Obviously, data can't paint that picture of big goals. You just see 30 goals or whatever it was in 70 games. And at the same time, technically, he is very good. I think I prefer him down the middle. A lot of people think he's good on the left. I think as a sole striker, you may be somewhat disappointed because I think just naturally he will like to track back a lot. He likes to sort of receive the ball from deep, try and make a driving run. He scored the iconic goal against Crystal Palace, as obviously our big rivals. And he did that by sort of taking the ball from probably about the halfway line, playing a nice little driving run, played 1-2 with Danny Welbeck. And I think that sort of goal is very much about Pedro. I think one of his best performances actually came for us against City last season. I can't remember if we lost that game now. And I think he just covered so much ground and he didn't even score in that game. So stuff like that, you don't get to see perhaps. He's a little cheat. I'm not going to lie. He likes a dive. He'll throw himself to the ground. And it is sometimes you think, just get up. But it wins you games. That Fulham moment. We haven't beaten Fulham in 9 years. And he's the one that's throwing himself on the ground and scoring a penalty in the 95th minute. That's what you get from Joao Pedro. He's the bully boy, but he's the sort of guy you want on your team, I think.
In terms of his growth, I think it's interesting comparing from when he was at Watford, right? When he came into English football. And physically, I don't know if you've noticed this, it's just something I've noticed watching him at the start of last season under Fabian Hürzeler. He seems to have grown physically into a point where you could see him more as a focal point than I would have a couple of years ago when it seemed like he was more of a wide player. You talk about him down the middle there. I think there's an interesting conversation already amongst Chelsea fans of how Joao Pedro is going to be used by Enzo Maresca. Do you think he's grown enough and matured enough to be that main man if Maresca wants to play him there a bit more?
I think so. I think what cost him last season was the fact he wasn't playing in his position that he wanted to play. And I guess that's in that because you had Jorginho was playing so well as well. So they're almost counterproductive, probably, you'd say. So sometimes you'd have to sacrifice and play out front, but then Welbeck would be scoring goals, so you maybe go out wide. Not necessarily always playing the best out wide because Mitoma would be there. So we sort of almost tried to just squeeze him in with Jorginho down the middle, which it didn't always work. And say maybe it was a little bit counterproductive because they're quite similar players. They're almost this 9.5 modern player, like a Cunha probably, that sort of player. I think Cunha's a bit better than him at this stage anyway. But I think as a technical player, I like him down the middle. My question, is probably where he fits for you, because I guess I look at Chelsea and I think you need a clinical goal scorer. And whilst he is that to an extent, I still remember a few missed chances. And I would worry perhaps that, the pessimist in me from your point of view would be if it doesn't go so well, say up to January, and he's not got as much game time and say XYZ's having a good string of games and scoring a lot of goals and things are going well for Chelsea, I wouldn't be so surprised to see him get a bit agitated like he did at the end of this season for us. Because he fell out with De Zerbi as well. So that's a bit of a common trait, something's in him. He's obviously, there's a temperament there, perhaps.
It's one of those things where you see with certain players that their best attribute, it's more that kind of, that thing that probably makes him what he is on the pitch is also probably his biggest downfall off the pitch. So but to be fair to some Chelsea fans, I think there's been a frustration that we haven't had that confrontational nature enough on the pitch, especially leading from the front. And I think there's an expectation that maybe he could play off a centre forward. So now you've got like Liam Delap or Nicholas Jackson or maybe someone else who comes in. God knows what Chelsea do for the rest of the window. And I wonder whether you think that would be, let's say, a left forward, kind of as you said, right? Like not exactly a 9, but someone who could play with him and connect with. Do you think that's would be a suitable role for him at Stamford Bridge, and could you see that working?
Yeah, possibly. I think he's been quite gifted here, is that he hasn't had to have a set position. I think Brighton are a team that is quite accommodating towards, pure talent. I think if you were willing to be a little bit more like that, perhaps, I don't know exactly whether Maresca is, because I know he's quite systematic, but I think if you were to allow him a little bit of space to drift out wide, to come inside, to go a little bit deeper, to play sort of a freer role, perhaps you might be able to see a better Joao Pedro. I think that's probably the way I'll describe him anyway, because it would be hard to say he's definitely there, because he doesn't always just play there. He is a bit of a anywhere across a four, although probably rarely off the right, you would say. But even then, I can probably think of a few times where he's sort of done inward crosses from the right side. So he is one that will like to drift around. But I think if you were to put it as an average as opposed to a set position, you would say 9.5, 10. Whereas if you were to actually watch a full 90 minutes, you wouldn't call him any of those. It's a weird one. People say, should you have players that don't have a position? I see a lot of people say, oh no, I want a number 9. I want a number 9. But I think that's just the way football's gone. I don't think it's necessarily a negative thing that you haven't got a number 9, because you've got a number 9, but you've also got a number 10. You've also got a left winger. You've also got a bit of an inside forward, perhaps, or whatever you want to call that. So he's a bit of a hybrid player, you would say. And whether people like that or not, I don't know. It remains to be seen as to whether it works at the pressure of a big club in the Champions League. Is he going to be afforded as much slack? Perhaps is he going to be afforded that time at Chelsea? If he's scoring at Real Madrid, which I'd fully expect him to do, is he still going to play very well against Sunderland at home? When it's a 3:00 kickoff and no one's watching. That's the difference for me with Joao. That's his common inconsistency is there, as opposed to where he actually plays on the pitch.
Going back to the start of our conversation to wrap it up, you were speaking about how bad it was to lose Moises Caicedo, and there was very much a feeling like probably early on that he was going to become this brilliant midfielder. With Pedro, I've heard at least one person I respect from a Chelsea point of view feel that it could be like a Sadio Mane moment for Chelsea. Like you take someone from one level and he's about to explode at Chelsea. And if you look at just those goal numbers, they are not bad goal numbers, to be honest. And that's Premier League goal numbers, by the way. That's not just like goals against like League Two opposition in the FA Cup. That is quite impressive. Do you see the potential of Pedro to step up and go to this next level if he can rein all those kind of bad things in?
100%. That is Joao Pedro for me, and that's why I'm, as I say, with Caicedo, Joao Pedro. Those are the two that I was worried about. I knew Caicedo wouldn't flop, and I think that I've got that same feeling with Joao Pedro. As I say, it is just such a problem, probably a raining cloud over him as to whether he can just snap that out. Because I remember some Watford fans saying the same thing. So yeah, I actually genuinely do wish him all the best. I actually would like to see him somewhat do okay. Although I can't help but feel that bitter taste in the last few months and just think, if you really wanted to do this, you really wanted to be a top player, you would have shown it when Brighton are pushing for Europe again, regardless of whether you're happy with the system, because you could have then gone to, I don't know, into Real Madrid. I don't know, probably not Real Madrid, but a top team. And instead, probably you'd feel like he's maybe just taken his foot off the gas, and maybe you've just had Chelsea bail you out a little bit. That's how it feels to me. I'm not disrespecting Chelsea there, actually. I'm almost giving you the sense of, you guys like to spend money at Brighton, and if no one else is going to take him, you can bet your bottom dollar that Chelsea will. And yeah, I don't know how to feel about it. I'll be honest, it's still quite raw. I've not even thought about the fact he's left yet. I'm looking at this here. It's Manchester United's moment, and I've got just there the Marseille moment, sort of hanging, and I'm just thinking, I can't believe he's the one that's gone now. It will be a shame.
But I think, although there are, rivalry between Chelsea and Brighton, I do think that the ability of Brighton to replace those players has been pretty consistent, to be fair. It's not, it's not a situation where Caicedo left and then suddenly you've dropped to the bottom half of the Premier League. Like there's clearly, I think probably from just an outside perspective, there should be some confidence that you'll reinvest that money smartly. But obviously, when you have these memories with players and they move on, it's kind of hard to feel, well, is there going to be another player like that? So I absolutely understand that. But thank you so much for Brian for taking the time to speak to us today. Just a quick chance to shout out your work, because obviously I know quite recently you've launched, not only because you've got your YouTube channel and your social media stuff, but you've also launched a site as well. So just a chance to shout that out before we wrap up.
To be fair, actually, I'd normally say don't look at my Brighton stuff to other rival channels because I think otherwise you're just a bit weird. But to be honest, actually, this is probably the one time I can say do it, because you can come and see all the players you're probably going to sign in a couple of years before they actually do. So come and look at my Brian Gruder scout reports this season, because he could well explode on talkseagulls.com.
Yeah, the Chelsea to Brighton, or the Brighton to Chelsea pipeline is pretty consistent, and I think there's about a 50-50 chance either someone's going to be connected to Man City previously, their academy, or Brighton. So it's going to be one of those two for a player. So definitely go and check out Ryan's work. Really appreciate him coming onto the show today. Hopefully you guys enjoyed watching and listening to it. Please do follow across the socials at SonOfChelsea. You're going to have tons more content coming up this week, not only about Joao Pedro, about the Club World Cup, but also about Jamie Gittins, another player who's about to join Chelsea as well. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you again very, very soon. All the best.